President Trump's Republicans don't usually speak out against him. But in the case of his ceasefire agreement with Iran, several top Republicans are breaking ranks, saying the agreement Trump calls a victory for the U.S. is really a lot better for Iran. I'll be talking about this with DW Washington correspondent Benjamin Alvarez Gruber. Benjamin, good to see you.
Hello, Benjamin, from Washington.
So, Benjamin, who are the Republicans who are not happy with this agreement, and what are they saying about it?
So there are several high-ranking senators from the Republican side. As you said, very unusual that they criticize President Trump so openly, and also the White House's attempt to already sell this agreement that was signed in Paris at Versailles Palace with the Iranian side as a success. They are trying to say that this is actually the first important step to then work on this 60 days that are now running to talk about those details. Coming back to the Republicans, some of them are saying that the outcome of this conflict is not worth the cost to the United States. The lives of 13 U.S. service members, more than 100 billion US dollars spent. But the biggest criticism is this fund for a reconstruction of Iran, with many wondering, why was this bombing actually taking place to then give Iran this money? And the biggest question that still remains is how different this current deal, this memorandum of understanding, these 14 points that both Iran and the U.S. agreed to, how different will that be from the JCPOA, the previous agreement that was signed under the Obama administration and then was cancelled by the Trump administration, saying that it did not address the Iranian ballistic program, the Iranian program there. So there is some criticism, but many open questions yet. So it's quite surprising to hear several senators from the Republicans being so openly critic to this agreement signed by the U.S. president during his last trip to Europe.
Benjamin, stay with us. I want to play a clip from Senator Ted Cruz's podcast. Cruz really picks up on the $300 billion fund to rebuild Iran that you mentioned there. That it's supposed to get under this deal. He says he doesn't really care that the White House has promised that this fund will not be paid by the U.S.
I don't want a lunatic religious fanatic who chants death to America to receive $300 billion, whether it comes from us or it comes from some other regional partners. I don't care where it comes from. Giving people who want to kill you the billions and billions of dollars from any source historically has proven an enormous mistake.
Strong words from Ted Cruz there. How has Trump been responding to the criticism coming from his own camp?
So we've heard a lot of pushback from the White House by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who gave a press conference at the White House press briefing room, and he said, addressing not only critics here in the United States, but also critics within the Israeli government, that this is an important step, this is an important deal that has been signed, that they will still work on those details. And that's also something that we heard from President Trump today, saying that they have this 60 days now to talk about these details. And he said, if there's no deal to be reached here, we will do things that will not make them happy. So the threats continue from the side of the White House. Well, they're trying to sell this as a success, especially considering the criticism from within the Republican Party, within their own party. But they say this is important, and they made this comparison between the JCPOA under Obama, saying that the countries in the Gulf region are actually happy with this new deal, as they were not with the last one. But it remains to be seen if they will be able to sell this to Capitol Hill, to lawmakers on both sides. But they might be able to sell this to the U.S. public, and especially to the voters who wanted to see President Trump returning to the White House with one of the promises of ending the United States' endless wars.
Let's talk about them. How does Trump's base, the MAGA movement, the people who voted for this guy who said he was going to end all these wars, here he's started one. How are they, and now trying to get out of it, how are they responding to this agreement?
So by looking at social media, especially those who are very, very supportive of President Trump, they already say that this is a success without waiting for the details. What will actually be said in those details? How will these negotiations continue? Vice President J.D. Vance was supposed to fly to Switzerland to talk about these details. That has now been postponed indefinitely. But the big question is whether the U.S. public will, if oil prices, due to this agreement, due to free ships being able to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, lowering the prices of oil here, and they see the difference when they take the cars, go to the gas pump and see that it's lowering, if they will actually buy this as a success. President Trump was under a lot of pressure, is still under a lot of pressure here back home to end this war. It was never quite clear what the end game would be, and especially the Iranians who wanted to see a regime change and now feel that this is off the table, as there has been some agreement with the Iranian regime, would have liked to see President Trump going even stronger with these military attacks against Iran. So the threats continue. This is the first document that was signed that President Trump was really proud that he signed. It was quite surprising to see him actually signing it a couple of days before his vice president was supposed to sign it in Switzerland. But it's always the little thing in those details we'll be able to see what this agreement will look like, and if they will be able to do so in the 60-day time frame. The JCPOA, they needed years to actually find an agreement, so many experts say it will be quite hard to find some understanding on the most tricky parts, especially on the Iranian ballistic program.
Benjamin, we'll have to see how this all turns out. Thanks for your reporting. Well, this week, President Trump insisted multiple times that this agreement was a win for the U.S. and that his authority as president is unchecked.
Put the limits on your power as a result of the conflict.
There are no limits.
No limit.
No, not. I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily.
You had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And
well,
the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
Giorgio Cafiero is a Middle East analyst and the CEO of Gulf State Analytics, a Washington, D.C. based geopolitical risk consulting firm. Giorgio, thanks for joining me. We just heard Trump there saying it was unconditional surrender for Iran. What's Tehran saying about that?
Well, objectively speaking, I think it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to frame the Islamabad MOU as total capitulation on Iran's part. I think it's quite clear that it's the U.S. side under this MOU that is conceding much more than Iran is conceding. I think actually the leadership in Tehran is feeling very emboldened. You know, when we go back to the beginning of this conflict in late February, early March, we heard Trump and others in his administration speaking about the goals that the U.S. had in this conflict. These were really maximalist demands that the U.S. had for Iran. Talk about regime change. I mean, we're so far away from that right now. I think it's frankly absurd to claim that this is total surrender on Iran's part.
Giorgio, we're hearing scathing criticism of this deal by some top Republicans like Ted Cruz, like Senators Bill Cassidy and Tom Cotton. All of them supported the war. I'm wondering, how likely was a different outcome to the war that they supported?
Well, I think there's a lot of frustration among Republican lawmakers right now. They understand that the U.S. paid a lot for this conflict in terms of treasure and also in terms of American blood. And right now they're asking what it is that the United States really got out of this war. I think the terms of this MOU point to how disastrous this war has been for U.S. interests. They seem to think that continuing this war, or at least trying to put more pressure on Iran to make more concessions to the U.S., will make it so that this war has not really been in vain. But I think what Trump sees is a need to really cut losses. And I think Trump has come around to understanding that the costs will only go up for the U.S. if the war is to continue. And I think that is where you have some real disagreement between Trump and some of these Republican lawmakers.
So you're saying that there is no better end game for the U.S., even as these Republican lawmakers would not like to end the war here?
Well, I agree. I'll be the first one to recognize that there is a real element of humiliation for Washington here. And this is something that's very difficult for lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to accept. But my view is that these costs would only go up if the U.S. was to continue waging this war. And therefore, while this does not make for a great outcome for the United States, I think out of all the options that are on the table, this is the best choice that the Trump administration can make at this point. Now, there's a lot to say about how there was really no wisdom on the part of those who pushed for this war, but that was a discussion to have back in February. Now we're in the middle of June, and we are where we are, and the Trump administration has to deal with the current set of realities that the United States faces.
Some critics of the U.S.-Iran agreement say that Iran is actually in a stronger position now than it was with the nuclear deal under President Obama in 2015, the JCPOA, the deal that Trump got rid of. J.D. Vance is saying, no, this deal is way better for the U.S. than Obama's deal was. So how is Iran's strength now compared to back then?
Well, I do think that Iran is in a stronger position now in the region and on the international stage. This last conflict gave Tehran an opportunity to demonstrate to the world that it does have this leverage vis-a-vis the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran was not bluffing during those years in which it threatened to close the strait. Countries all over the world have had to pay a price for Iran's decision to close the Strait of Hormuz. And this is real leverage that Iran has, and it has demonstrated that it's willing to use. Of course, officials in the Trump administration are going to try to push a narrative about how Iran came to this MOU from a position of weakness, and now the U.S. is in a much stronger position than when Washington and the other parties signed the JCPOA during Obama's years. But I think it's pretty clear that the U.S. is in a much weaker position today compared to the point over a decade ago when Obama was in the White House and the U.S., Iran, and the other powers entered into the JCPOA.
The White House has been telling skeptics of this agreement to hold their judgment for now and to judge it by the outcome of the talks. Do you think anything in the outcome of the talks will change these skeptics' mind?
I don't think so. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that we don't know exactly what is going to come out of the talks that will be presumably taking place during this upcoming period of 60 days. But I think it's a little difficult to imagine Iran making any concessions at this point that Iran did not make back in 2015 when the JCPOA went into effect. So I think probably those who are criticizing the Trump administration for conceding too much to the Islamic Republic are unlikely to really change their criticisms 60 days from now or whenever we get to that point of some sort of a deal presumably being finalized, assuming that we do get to that point.
Giorgio Cafiero, thanks for talking to us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
What do you think? Will Republicans end up rallying around this agreement, or is this a sign that Trump's grip on his party is loosening? Let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe.